Hi there. I like doing the last book recommendation video, and talking about my preferred hobby is fun, so here's another. I'm thinking of maybe turning this into a monthly or every 2 months sort of thing, so let me know what you think of that idea. Maybe I could do themes, covering this or that topic and throwing out recommendations and whatnot. Anyways, of course, I'll timestamp this video, so if you want to jump to a particular book, then just take a look in the description box or the pinned comment. So yeah, let's get started. The first book is Liberalism, A Counterhistory by Domenico Lacerda. This book is an absolute masterpiece, and Lacerda does an amazing job systematically showing how hypocritical liberalism really is. From its very inception, despite its proclamations of liberty and fraternity, its foundations and the institutions it would build atop of them were rotten to the core. Justifications of slavery, the rampant spread of colonialism, discriminatory racism, and outright genocide. Of course, all with a particular emphasis on the US, Britain, and France. This should be a must-read for any Marxist, as it is, at the core, a beautifully constructed critique of liberal philosophical positions contrasted with liberal, pragmatic statements and actions. Lacerda sadly passed away recently, and even more sadly, many of his works have yet to be translated from Italian into English, despite many translations into French and German and Spanish, etc. My only complaint is that this book can be a little dull at some places, and personally, I keep it as a reference point whenever I'm confronted with the usual liberal posturing about liberty and all that forked tongue nonsense. Book number 2, 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism by Ha-Joon Chang. Now, Ha-Joon Chang should be a familiar name to people who have been around the left for a while, not particularly because he's a leftist, but because of his pretty damn great criticisms of free market capitalist economists. His other works, like Bad Samaritans and Kicking Away the Ladder, are also excellent, and could tie into the message of this book too. In this book, he mentions commonly believed ideas about capitalism that are just outright nonsense, and shows how bullshit they are, with solid argumentation and sourcing. He shows how most people in rich countries are paid way more than they should be, how free market policies actually make poor countries poorer, despite IMF and World Bank ideologues saying otherwise, how Africa is not destined for underdevelopment, and further debunking of stuff like trickle-down economics and the like. Honestly, it's a great book, particularly for people less interested in economics and their social/political significance. A complaint I do have is that, at the end of the day, Ha-Joon Chang is still a liberal. Parts of this book are stuffed with anti-communist nonsense, which goes, conveniently, completely unsourced. He even concludes the book by saying that, apparently, capitalism is the best system we have, and that all it needs is a few extra band-aids. At best, his political stance is social democrat, and that really blunts the edge of some of his criticisms. Still, take the good and leave the bad, I say. It's a great book otherwise. October by China Miéville. A lovely book about, what else, the Great October Socialist Revolution. The author speaks about the history in a more narrative style, and in this way he manages to not be as dry as other writers on the October Revolution. In this way, it almost reads like a thrilling novel than anything else. Honestly though, this is the most problematic book in this list, I'd say. Although great for its factual information and flow, the author is a pathetic excuse for a Marxist. He swallows bourgeois lies whole and never skips an opportunity to villainize the USSR. All of this, of course, to appeal to the sensibilities of a liberal audience. I assume that this was the only way he could get it published, and if that really is the case, then shame on Verso. But I'd say read this only after you have a solid grasp of the history of the October Revolution and the USSR, and are especially aware of the fallacies of the bourgeois narrative. Thankfully, his telling of the events during the revolution are objective enough, and his style entertaining enough, so do check the book out. Kill Anything That Moves by Nick Turse. A book that I put off reading for a while, and then immediately regretted not having read earlier. This is simply a great introduction into the horrific war crimes committed by the US in Vietnam. I was always aware that the US did horrible, horrible things everywhere they went, and especially in Southeast Asia, but I had no idea it was this bad. Some of the stories told defy American soldiers qualifying as beasts, let alone human beings. The sheer hatred and lack of empathy towards a people that did nothing to them is not only sickening, it's eye-opening. It shows the true nature of the empire, and what it will do, or more accurately, what it wouldn't not do, towards its aims. As an Iraqi, the things elucidated in this book resonate with me further because The Americans didn't shy away from doing similar things in my own country, the difference being there wasn't a massive anti-war movement against the US occupation of Iraq, and hence American war crimes in Iraq are badly documented in English. Read this, especially if you're American, you need to read this. See what your government really stands for. Blitzed by Norman Ohler. As the tagline says, drugs in Nazi Germany. Although it seems a little specific, I like this book and would recommend it because it shows the absolute hypocrisy of Nazis, especially at the top level, Hitler and Goering, etc. For all their posturing about degeneracy and fighting for a pure, clean, Aryan way of life, they were morally bankrupt. Surprise, surprise. Drugs are what kept Nazi Germany going, all the way from housewives to soldiers to the very top of the government. The piece of shit himself, Hitler, was a massive addict, with quite the list of drugs he took in order to relieve pain. It's all too clear that these upstanding Aryan examples were the same as the addicts they condemned. Why would I recommend this book then? Well, as you may be aware, fashy, edgy types are springing up on small corners of the internet, fueled by a complete lack of understanding of political thought, philosophy, or political economy. Their heads filled with a skewed perception of history, a fondness of aesthetics over actual content, and the old favorite of the far right, condemnations of degeneracy. Of course, this is rich coming from these people that do nothing aside from play video games, hating blacks, and shooting up the alt school or two. Nonetheless, this book is a perfect expose of that degeneracy nonsense. As it turns out, the biggest degenerates were the Nazis themselves. It's also written in a very engaging style. Reminiscences of the Cuban Revolutionary War by Che Guevara. I promised you last time that I'd throw in another Che book, and here it is. This would be my favorite work of Che's so far. Of course, that's hard to qualify exactly because practically everything he wrote was great. This was just a lovely installment in my ever-growing admiration and respect for Che. Nevertheless, why this book? Granted, this isn't a theory book, but it's a history of the Cuban Revolution from a Marxist guerrilla on the ground at the time. Not only any guerrilla though, but one that organized several victories. It covers certain daily problems, and greater, that occur in a guerrilla camp, preparing for attacks, the politics between differing groups, and of course, an overview from Che's perspective of the Cuban Revolutionary War, all the way from the Sierra Maestra to Santa Clara. If you think that maybe one day you'd encounter similar circumstances, then give this book a read. If you're interested in Che or Cuba, give this book a read. If you're simply sick of reading dense works, then give this book a read. It's smooth and you'll enjoy every moment, I promise you. Frantz Fanon, A Dying Colonialism. A lesser known, or at least lesser read, masterpiece of Frantz Fanon. His beautiful eloquence with words is back, of course, and so is his radical anti-colonial message. This book specifically covers, much like his other major work, the Algerian Revolution. It covers the struggle of a colonized people against their occupier and details certain aspects of that resistance. For example, the thing I found most interesting being the use of the hijab. This is the reason I love this work, actually. It details the disgusting sexual aspects of colonialism, particularly the attitude of the colonizer to the colonized woman. Of course, French brutality shows ever clearly in this work, as it always does through their actions. This book also covers the role of women in the revolution, and particularly their altered mindset towards liberation. An Algerian woman that had to carry grenades through the streets of Constantine would not stand for injustices dealt to her after the revolution. The book also includes a lovely chapter on medicine and colonialism that I thoroughly enjoyed. I'd say that this should be read in conjunction with Frantz Fanon's other major works, being The Wretched of the Earth and Black Skin, White Masks. It's a shame that one full volume of Frantz Fanon's work hasn't been compiled yet, at least in the English language, or maybe I'm just unaware of such compilation. And that's it for this time. Maybe get a few of these for Easter if you celebrate it. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider supporting me on Patreon, it really does help. I was originally planning to add a couple more books, but I did that last time and I thought that there were a bit too many books last time, so maybe keep it a bit short and sweet. Anyways, I'd like to thank my patrons, so thank you to Zarian Arson, Xiaoyan Zhang, Laurie Valdemar Minialo, Khan, Daryl McFarlane, Adrian Rinaldi, Aaron B. Lingwood, Kagri Karahmed, Andy Haywood, Ellie Garzon, Faustin, Henny Ashurst, Aaron Koger, Jeremiah Butler, Jonathan Chavez, Industrial Robot, Amar Abdul-Jabbar, Wes Franklin, Mia Nakano, Liam Sipanen, Connor O'Reilly, Brennan Ruffing, Jedi Davian, Nut Ringheimlunde, Mika Argyropoulos, Michael Duchette, Mothi Yu, Peter Coffin, Zatarani, Comrade Pingu, and of course Charles. Thank you, Charles. that'll be all for today, and I'll see you next time. It will be the 2 videos on further debunking race realism, that being the usual arguments that race realists bring up, and the final video being the consequences of such ideas. So look forward to those. See ya!